The Elder was Kiss's masterpiece, in the same vein as Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun. It was an album that flopped upon release, but that was due to the fact that Kiss had lost so many fans because of the reception of 1979's Dynasty and 1980's Unmasked. If The Elder came out right after Love Gun, then the fan base would be somewhat more interested in this new idea that they were going for. It's a concept album, which is awesome, not stupid. If other bands, such as The Who, The Beatles, and Pink Floyd, can come out with concept albums, then I don't see why Kiss can't. Because to me, Kiss is just as good of a band as those bands. And I say that with 100% honesty. Even though the lyrics of Kiss music aren't that deep, and usually they were about being sleazy and partying and or being wild and crazy, they still were extremely talented musicians that were capable of so much more. I felt that they proved that with The Elder. I honestly feel that The Elder is just as good as Pink Floyd's The Wall, The Who's Tommy album, and the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. Those albums did have deeper lyrics, with deeper meanings about life. Pink Floyd's The Wall is relatable because it's about the people wanting to build a revolution to break the wall against oppression. The Who's Tommy album has relatable lyrics about the confusion and struggles of growing up and what kinds of effects can be had on a child growing up with terrible family members. But the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper? It's an album that I feel is about someone who goes through a series of events, which ends the person's life by the end of the album, with the song A Day in the Life, which is probably about Paul McCartney being dead. But anyway, Kiss's The Elder has an assumed simple story about a boy and his journey, going on an adventure, where he grows stronger with each new obstacle he faces. Many fans have criticized the story, written by Gene Simmons, by calling it too generic, and that's kind of fair, but the story of The Elder still has an air of mystery to it. The whole symbology of the door on the front cover, and the mystery of Mr. Blackwell. Even though the story is simple, it's about the presentation and how entertaining it is to hear the story at the end of the day. Could the story have been more fleshed out? Sure, of course. A good example to compare it to is the Rush album 2112. I think that a lot of Kiss fans were very fed up by the time The Elder was released, that they weren't really willing to humor Kiss's new concept album idea with a story. Many fans hated Dynasty and Unmasked. I think those are great albums, but they were just victims of the anti-disco phase in the pop culture that was going on at the time. It was a movement that really doesn't exist today. I think people were a lot more intense about defending their style of music back then, compared to today. Whereas today, people are more open-minded and are willing to try and listen to other styles of music. Perhaps Ace Frehley was correct, that The Elder could have been released at a different time. Paul and Gene and Bob Ezrin could have spent more time writing the story over the course of years, and then 2 or 3 albums later could have came The Elder. Still, I think most fans were very unreasonable about The Elder. Not a good sign. It kind of makes Kiss fans appear to be a bunch of meatheads who can't appreciate high art as a concept album with a story and somewhat different music ideas. This isn't the first time that Kiss fans rejected the idea of them becoming more detailed and experimental with their music. Many fans also strongly disliked Destroyer, and if most of the complaints are about the song Beth, then I can understand that. But the rest of the album sounds great to me. I even like that annoying bratty kid in God of Thunder. But anyway, back to the Elder album. What exactly was the big deal at the time? Was the album actually bad? Well, I definitely feel that there are tracks that sound like cool, badass, typical Kiss tracks, like Dark Light, The Oath, Only You, and I. But others, not so much. But I don't think any song on the album is bad to me. Now, many complaints have been given towards the album cover. I think The Door is very mysterious and cool, but many said that it doesn't look like a Kiss album. That's fair. People say that the band should appear on the cover. Not a bad idea. After all the other previous albums made their image, makeup, and costumes the attention on the front album cover. So maybe they could have all appeared behind the door instead, with a hand still opening it, or they could have added the Kiss symbols of all 4 band members on the door. I'm also amazed that the hand on the cover is from a photograph. It looks so good that I assumed that it was a painting. Goes to show how much better old photographs look compared to today's photos. I just despise the statement many Kiss fans say that Paul and Gene thought that they were talented enough to make a concept album. But they are, and they did create a great concept album. That statement has always grinded my gears, and I'm sick of it. Everyone's entitled to their dumbass opinion, but I always thought Kiss had more talent, that they could pull something like this off. And at this point, they had worked hard enough for music fans to humor their new concept album idea. Instead, many music fans and Kiss fans slapped Paul and Gene in the face for it. This would have negative ramifications of Kiss's musical output down the line. It's because of those fans that albums like Sonic Boom and Monster weren't better albums. The message was given to Paul and Gene that the fans just want them to sing about the same exact stuff they only sang out in the 1970s, which eventually got pretty annoying at times in the 80s and 90s. With many of those lyrics, the creativity of Kiss was stunted by the fans. So perhaps the lesson here is that it was unreasonable for Gene and Paul to expect the fans to care about the Elder idea at the time in 1981. But if they had earned their favor again by a few more years, then the reception of the Elder could have been completely different. Now, despite all the complaints about the Elder over the years, to me, I actually find the album fitting as a Kiss album in particular. Kiss was always about being daring, about not being afraid to be different, to stand out, and to be confident with their message and image. Well, doesn't that sound like the Elder? Everything that Kiss represents is reflective of the Elder. They were very different when they first emerged in the 70s, with their wild costumes, stage show extravaganzas, and face paint makeup. So, in the 80s, they were being different again by creating a story with new visuals, being focused with a vision, just like their focused vision of how they were in the 1970s. It's fair that many fans weren't a fan of that vision, but I honestly feel that many Kiss fans didn't even listen to the Elder in 1981 anyway. Many fans at the time were totally disinterested in Kiss. So the Elder didn't flop because it was a stupid idea. It flopped because many fans were confused and annoyed with Kiss. For a few years up to that point. Do people think that the Elder is too campy? If so, that's a pretty silly complaint, 'cause Kiss was always corny, the whole time they were a band. Was the album too serious? And Kiss music is supposed to be more laid back and simple? I guess, but it's not like it's Shakespeare-like lyrics. The album does contain lyrics that are relatable to people, just like how the old Kiss songs were relatable to people. If some of the Elder songs were about chicks, anarchy, and being rebellious, would the fans like the album better then? Would that make it feel more like a Kiss album? Yeah, probably. Those lyrics are what we love about Kiss. But is that the only stuff that Kiss are only good for? Comparing Kiss to the Beatles again, what if the Beatles never took drugs in the late 60s, and never gave us deep lyrics later on? Then we would not have gotten the White Album Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour, and etc. Kiss, and in particular Gene Simmons, always admired the Beatles, and being inspired by them, I think, is always a good thing. So why were Kiss denied by the fans the idea to improve their lyrics, alter their sound to a degree, and be experimental? If the Beatles were allowed to do it, then so are Kiss. And if you're a fan of The Elder, could you imagine the other kinds of cool Kiss concept albums we could have gotten over the years? In rock history, there have been countless bands that changed their direction a little bit and tried different ideas, because that shows progression and a growth about learning how to play music better. Like with the band Rush. They were a classic hard rock band in the 70s, but in the 80s, they changed their style and became very popish, with albums like Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and Signals. They didn't sound bad, or un-Rush-like, because they still contained what Rush was always about. The same could be said for Kiss and The Elder. For example, I think The Elder song I has a similar message to the song Flaming Youth from Destroyer. They're basically both songs about intense empowerment, that despite the amount of naysayers against you, that if you believe in yourself, that you can accomplish great things in life, and in your own way. You see, The Elder does contain similar beats to the old Kiss from the 70s. Fans just didn't even attempt to notice the similarities. The Elder stands as a testimony to what can happen when you try to do your own thing, and if people love it, then great, and if people hate it, then oh well. But another problem is that Kiss now became all about money. But being an artist means to take risks, to put your ideas out there, and to be brave with them. It's what made them successful in the 70s, and it still made them successful with The Elder, because now The Elder is looked at as a beloved Kiss album. So the album just needed time to be appreciated. So despite all the criticism of The Elder, in the long run, The Elder actually was successful. And I don't understand why they don't make the Elder movie now. At this point, The Elder has enough fans, and Kiss fans would watch a movie about the Elder album, have it be animated or live action, and make the soundtrack of the film be what the album was. And a new 2020s Elder movie would have many Kiss fans feel differently about the Elder, and would help make certain Kiss fans warm up to the album. And this way, the potential that is the Elder can come full circle as an awesome Kiss idea. A new Elder movie would be a lot better than the new Kiss AI hologram concerts coming next year. In a different video, I talked about how I think that it's a cool idea, but it's still just another Kiss concert. Will it be different enough from what we've seen from Kiss concerts in the 2010s and 2020s? I hope so. But an Elder movie is actually a less risky idea, because there are more people that are a fan of the Kiss album The Elder than the AI hologram stuff going on these days. Then again, just like how I thought Kiss fans should have given The Elder a fair chance when it came out in '81, is the same way that I think Kiss fans should at least consider the idea that the AI hologram shows could be entertaining. Anyway, thanks for watching, Kiss Army, and rock and roll all night, and listen to The Elder.